Well, folks, your summer can officially begin. Koa Peat has spoken and taken the stage as an Arizona Wildcat.
Welcome on in, guys, to the AZ Wildcats Podcast. I'm your host, Damon Fairall. That is the man himself, Kevin Thomas, and we are here in beautiful downtown Phoenix at PHNX HQ2, ready to make our move to HQ3 here pretty shortly. Kevin, excited for that, excited for the new opportunities and kind of the new era of PHNX sports, but we still got a couple weeks here left at this studio, and we got some Arizona Wildcats coverage to bring you folks on a Tuesday. Is it a Tuesday?
No, it is a Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday.
I woke up and felt like it was Thursday or Friday, and I got really excited, and then I got really sad.
Not me. I wish the week was longer. I wish we could talk more of Arizona Wildcats ball every day, hourly, for the fine folks at home.
For the record, though,
should we do 7 shows a week?
Maybe, but for the record, though, we could talk all we want every day of the week. We don't need the work week to be any longer. We could actually just do this on the weekend, go rogue if you wanted to.
We could just start recording our general conversations, Kevin, and start releasing those out as podcasts as well. I'd get in trouble,
stuff. Damon. I'd get in a lot of trouble.
You'd get in trouble.
We'd get in trouble.
Yeah. I think they'd be like, "Oh, Kevin, that wasn't so nice." They'd be like, "Damon, you're fired."
Yeah. Well,
Damon, you don't have a job anymore.
Max in the chat says 24-hour live stream.
Kevin is dying to do that for some reason.
Not really, but I mean,
not really. You're volunteering us.
Well, that happened one time. But I will say, like, what would it take for that? Like, in your end, what do you think it would take?
If Arizona was to make a Final Four, I would be willing to do it.
Can I be honest with you? And please do correct me if I'm wrong.
I need nets cut down.
Wasn't that my initial stipulation that you said was not enough?
You know, at first you said Final Four, and then you started moving it down to like Elite Eight. No, I swear to God,
I did not do that.
I swear,
man.
You started being like, I'd do Sweet 16 maybe if Damon wanted to, and I'd be like, what?
No. Anyway,
who are you?
I don't know who that was, because that couldn't have been me that said that. But I like the Final Four shout. If they make it, I'd be down.
I would do it solely for just like putting the good vibes out into the universe of like, those are future Damon problems to have, future Kevin problems to have. If the Arizona Wildcats make a Final Four, we're on top of the world, Kevin. In that 24-hour stream, I'll tell you what, for about 18 hours of that stream, I'm going to be juiced up. And then the final 6 hours probably going to be pretty brutal.
Yeah, honestly, I would be interested to see how long the energy could hold. You know what I mean? How long before we absolutely need a guest to come in and help us out and play some NCAA or whatnot to get through the time. But that, like you said, that is a future Damon and a future Kevin problem. Right now, we don't got to worry about how we're going to spend 24 hours. Right now, we're worried about how we're going to spend the next hour with you guys, because that's what is the task at hand. Shout out to all the new faces in the chat. Shout out to everybody, the returners in the chat as well. Leave a like, leave a comment. Let us know how your Wednesday is going. Damon and I, we were going to have clips from this press conference of Koa Peat and Brayden Burries, and they just must be quite loquacious. They just might be talkers. I didn't take Brayden Burries to be a talker, but Arizona Athletics, as of at least starting the show, has not uploaded the presser yet. So we will break all that down likely tomorrow on the podcast then. But for today, we are going to look at this class of incoming freshmen and kind of extrapolate what are realistic expectations for this year's 2025 Arizona Wildcats team, and how can the history of this program kind of tell us what the future might be.
Kevin, not everyone is as short and sweet and to the point and efficient with their words as me and you.
Oh, yeah.
Guys like ourselves,
Yeah,
we just really get to it, and we just hit it hard, and we don't leave any extra room for any side dishes. You know what I mean? It's all about that main plate, that main entree.
I hate riffing. I hate fillers. I hate they call me the concise cat. You know what I mean? I only use words that I need to use.
Absolutely, brother. And absolutely. But I will say, the Arizona Wildcats recruiting class in 2025 is absolutely special when you stack it up versus some of the other best classes in Arizona basketball history. And, you could do that in two ways, right? You could obviously look at, what the class was finished in terms of its rating at the time of the final recruiting rankings and see kind of where it stacks up versus some of the other classes before the season. Or you could, in hindsight, look back at some of the classes that were most successful, that performed the best, and kind of compare and contrast to those classes to see what truly well-built Arizona basketball teams look like.
It was it's great.
Leah gets the bit. She got the bit. As I was talking about being short, sweet, to the point, efficient, and I just kept going on and over again. But there is Kevin, there's tons of data out there. It only goes back to a certain year. I believe 2007, 2008 is kind of when they started putting together full scale, transfer class rankings all together on 247 Sports. Before that, it was a little bit more of an unknown. Even the guys that were blue chippers don't have full ratings and whatnot. So it's a little bit more difficult to tell. You're kind of going based off of what, past resources and articles and whatnot. But Kevin, we compiled some of, as I said, the best classes from a rating perspective and the best classes just from a hindsight perspective. And should we start with maybe where this class ranks among the classes in terms of highest ratings of all time?
Yeah. And I think we should start first and foremost by just reiterating how special this upcoming class is. Third ranked class in 2025 behind just Houston and Duke. And you and I were going through the history lesson of all these classes today, not the history lesson, but the time machine, going back through the history of all that you've been through. But I was kind of blown away, and I said this to you, of all the elite classes that Arizona's had, multiple top 3 classes, a couple number 1 finishes in there as well. This class features 3 top 20 recruits in the history of the program, a top 5 recruit in the history of the program in Koa Peat, he's the 5th highest recruit in program history, a top 10 in Brayden Burries, he is the 7th highest rated recruit in Arizona history, and then the 18th highest rated recruit in Dwayne Aristode. So this class is unbelievable, and in a way, it's somewhat unprecedented for the program that has a ton of unprecedented classes in its history. So it is truly special, and I think that is the jumping off point from which I wanted to start. Because you and I are going to compare it to classes, and we're going to contrast it with other classes. But it's really each of the special classes that Arizona has brought together are one of ones in their own way. Because as you alluded to pre-show, the context in which these recruits enter matter almost more than the recruits that you compile in its own right? If you put Koa Peat Brayden Burries and Dwayne Aristode on the worst Arizona basketball team of all time, how far can they truly carry them? But if you put them on the 2025 team that seems ready to make a run, that totally changes the outcome for that class. So I think that's probably the best jumping off point, is just how special they are.
Yeah, this class, its overall ranking. And you could also look at the average rating too, and that would change a little bit of the math here. For example, a class that kind of comes to mind from that perspective would be the, I believe, the 2013 class, which featured Aaron Gordon, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, and Elliot Pitts. And that class was the 10th rated class in the country. Was, in terms of our rankings here, was the lowest class ranking of all the rankings that I compiled. I left off some of the really low ones that aren't even really in the discussion, but the average rating of this class is extremely high because Aaron Gordon and Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, similar to the Koa Peat Brayden Burries and Dwayne Aristode, both fall into that top 20 recruits in Arizona history, I believe. So, that class probably better on paper than maybe that number would suggest, but it also, you have to measure the quantity times the quality, right? And that's kind of what this math is trying to do here. The number 1 class since they really started putting this all together, Kevin, is the 2017 class. And it's an interesting place to start because it really is like maybe the worst of like the ones on this list. That was the class that brought in DeAndre Ayton, who was, clear blue chip recruit, could be an NBA player from the moment that he stepped on campus, dropped down to number 5 in the final rankings, despite being, number 1, number 2 recruit for much of his time, during his recruitment process. And, and that's a discussion for another day. But DeAndre Ayton was a top 5 overall player in his class. Then you brought in Brandon Randolph, who was another 5-star, who ended up having a pretty disappointing Arizona career. Ira Lee, who was, almost a top 40 recruit, borderline 5-star, very high 4-star. Emmanuel Acott, who enrolled early and was a 5-star, and obviously transferred to Boise State, had a pretty disappointing Arizona career. And Alex Barcelo, who had a good career at BYU once he left Arizona, but just really didn't have that career at Arizona that maybe a lot of people envisioned for him. So out of that class, you had 2 4-stars and 3 5-stars, Kevin, one of them being a high-level contributor out of, I would say, that entire group of 5 for this program. And yeah, I think despite being the number 1 class, I believe, in Arizona history, it's one of the more disappointing ones for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And when I'm looking at this 2017 class, obviously you have your DeAndre Ayton in there, who is the true, the belle of the ball in that class, right? The moneymaker for you there. But you're right. Like, in terms of what actually ended up happening with this class, it is a lot of underwhelming results in terms of what could have been. You alluded to, you bring in 3 true 5-star recruits there coming out of high school. And I mean, that is kind of what we're talking about with this 2025 class, but it does seem like the recruits from that 2017 class, even coming in, excluding DeAndre Ayton, of course, we're not really ready to produce day one at that high level that it needs to be at for you to get to a national championship or force us to do a 24-hour stream and make it to a Final Four, right? So I think that when you're looking at the differences between this year's class upcoming and the 2017 class is obviously, I mean, you have 2 players that could go. I don't know how high you want to say Brayden Burries could go in any sort of draft context, but you have multiple legitimate NBA prospects coming into this year's class that I feel like kind of all belong at the top of the 2017 class. Even if you put it that way, you can make an argument. I haven't really watched DeAndre Ayton's high school tape in a while, but you can make an argument for Koa Peat being a better prospect than DeAndre Ayton as well. I think that could be a nice back and forth conversation there. But yeah, the 2017 class is honestly kind of overrated by these ratings in a way.
For sure.
That I think the 2025 class is kind of underrated in these ratings when you kind of in our show rundown when you kind of rated them. The 2025 class being 4th, 2017 class being 1st. That kind of took me back at first, to be honest with you.
I won't go as far as to say Koa Peat is a better recruit than DeAndre Ayton. I think DeAndre Ayton was the, number 1, number 2, number 3 best player in his class. And I think Koa Peat's in a similar realm, but I would put Koa Peat kind of in like the 3, 4, 5 range, I feel like, for his class versus DeAndre Ayton, who I think was maybe just a slight step above that. And you're splitting the absolute thinnest hair possible there. But I've often said I think Koa Peat will be the best freshman at Arizona since DeAndre Ayton, but he'll contribute to winning at a higher level, just in the way that I think he cares more about winning, and I think his mentality is a lot different than a DeAndre Ayton. But the differentiator here for me when you're looking at these classes is the supplemental pieces for this 2025 class are just a lot better than that 2017 class. Like, no disrespect to Brandon Randolph and Ira Lee and Emmanuel Acott, but those guys are not Brayden Burries.
Correct.
Like that's the most simplest way I could put it. I think they're probably not even a Dwayne Aristode, who seems like he has a really good head on his shoulders and is super mature for his age as well. Coming in, like, should be ready to go from day one. But I just think Brayden Burries alone is better than all the rest of those players combined, essentially. And that puts it above that class from day one. Moving on, Kevin, and this is actually a very good class. The 2012 class comes in at number 2 on the and what's funny about this is that a lot of these classes, as we discussed pre-show, like, they're all like 3rd all the best Arizona classes are like the number 3 class in the country, basically. Like you're never number 1, you're never number 2, basically. But the 2012 class comes in at the second best class in Arizona basketball history, number 3 overall. And in that class, you brought in Grant Jarrett, you brought in Caleb Tarczewski, you brought in Brandon Ashley, and you brought in Gabe York. So you brought in 4 high-level contributors. Grant Jarrett was the number 1 recruit in that class, and he actually had the lesser of all of the 4 careers in terms of Arizona basketball wise. And he was still a good player on a good team. He was the number 12 overall recruit, 5-star. Was a good player on a team that lost a heartbreaker to Ohio State in that tournament, and then ended up going one and done. Should have stuck around. That's another one, Kevin. Like on the what if scenario that people don't remember. If we just had Grant Jarrett like we should have, that could have changed some things for that 2013 and that 2014 team that made the Elite Eights. That was just for a team that had a really short rotation. Bringing in another guy who played in the NBA who was like a stretch big like that could have just really, really done some damage. But Caleb Tarczewski was a starting center for 4 years for this program. Brandon Ashley had a very, very good Arizona basketball career. We all know, the broken foot kind of changed a lot of what he could have been, but was a starter on some of the best teams in this program's history. And then Gabe York stuck it out for 4 years, was a bench player for some really good teams, then took a larger role upon himself and was one of the best players on some of his upperclassmen teams when he started being a starter. So I think that class, you have to say that class is one of the all-timers in Arizona basketball history. 4 guys that were contributors and 3 that did so for multiple seasons on this team.
Yeah, and I think when we're trying to, like I said, compare these 2 classes here, I think you look at this 2025 class, and yes, you have a couple of candidates for a one-and-done career at Arizona, but you also have multiple guys that figure to be contributors for at least 2 seasons, right? I mean, obviously, we don't really know what Ivan Karchenkov has yet at the college level. He might be pro ready. He might not be pro ready. If he's not, I figure that in year 2, he would be a big contributor based on his skill set. Yeah. Same thing from Abil Mawut and CD Gay. You do figure that Bryce James is not a one and done talent based on his level of play. I mean, 3-star recruit coming in. Obviously, he does have some foundational skills, but not really at that Arizona level. And so, yeah, I mean, you have multiple contributors that are likely to stick around for at least 2 years. And then you also have your true blue chips in that class as well with Koa Peat Brayden Burries. And then to compare it to that Grant Jarrett, Caleb Tarczewski, Brandon Ashley kind of level of contribution, these classes are, I think, a lot more comparable than the 2017 comparison, which is ironic considering how the 2017 class is rated. But yeah, I do feel like of the ones that we've looked at so far, this is by far the closest comparison because you do have depth there in terms of length of career at Arizona. You just don't necessarily have as many supplemental pieces in that class as you do in the 2025 class. And you mentioned it, but the depth in the 2025 class, I think, is like truly like remarkable because you have so many, at least on paper, obviously we haven't played the 2025 season out, but you have multiple guys that figure to be high-level college basketball players at some point in their career on that in this incoming class, and it's a pretty deep one. So
yeah, I think that we've talked about it a little bit, like getting those blue chippers in, those United States prospects in particular, and then supplementing it with the unknowns and the mysteries of international prospects where they could really be surprising and like force the issue and make themselves starters from the moment they step on campus if they are that good, or they could be more developmental pieces that could be future, rotation players. They could even transfer to other places in the within the United States, within the NCAA. Like, for example, like I'm thinking of like a Pauly M. Obviously wasn't working out for him at Arizona, but he took the opportunity and made it work for himself at St. Mary's, or like a Daniel Bacho even. Adama Ball, like. There's a lot of these international prospects that, they could use Arizona as a jumping springboard, if you will, to getting to a different place in college. And that's not the ideal scenario, but it is like a benefit for these prospects to keep choosing Arizona because it gets their name out there a little bit more. Moving forward to round out the top 3 classes, according to 24/7 Sports in Arizona basketball history, the 2015 class is right up next and just edges out the 2025 class. And this is another class that, kind of just goes to show that a lot of these ratings sometimes can definitely not be the most accurate of sorts, because you bring in Alonzo Trier, who was that top 10 5-star recruit and was, I'm not the biggest fan of Alonzo Trier's game, to be quite honest with you. But that being said, like he was a good college basketball player. He really was. And he was, he contributed on multiple teams. Then you had Chance Comanche, who was, like a really high 4-star. Ray Smith, who, we've talked about on this show. We talked about on our What If episode, like just one of those careers at Arizona that you'll always remember and think to yourself, like, what if, he just could have stayed healthy. Number 12 overall recruit, didn't make it here. And then Justin Simon, who a name I forget about, who was a high 4-star and just didn't really contribute here at Arizona really at all. So in that class, you basically had one high-level contributor despite such a high class ranking. Another class that comes in at number 3 on the overall class rankings, Kevin.
And another just interesting, like, contextual piece to add to this, Damon, because when you mentioned Alonzo Trier and how highly rated he was and how you're not really a fan of his game, and
Bad
how
Max.
I'm also not really a fan of his game. That 2017 class is just strange. And I think, like, when you're talking about these ratings and how much water do they really carry, it also adds into context of, like, if you're a top 5 player in one class, that does not make you a top 5 player in the next one. You know what I mean? And I think, like, you're looking through this class: Ben Simmons, Skal Labissiere, Brandon Ingram, Check Diallo, my guy Jaylen Brown, and then Alonzo Trier. But, like, Diamond Stone's in this class, Dwayne Bacon, Ivan Robb as well, Thomas Bryanson. Like, the names in this class necessarily, like, aren't really, like, blowing your socks off. Now, I know that Ben Simmons coming out of high school and going into LSU, the expectations were sky high. I was a huge Ben Simmons believer as well. But I just think contextually it's very interesting, like, how you also might benefit from it being a weaker class and you having one of the higher rated players in a weaker class, and it kind of misrepresenting your true strength of recruiting in that way. Because I don't think Alonzo Trier, if you put him in the 2025 class, like, where do you even have Alonzo Trier? Like, is he, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the fact that he's like number 6 overall, yes. It's like, what exactly are we talking about? He's a higher ranked recruit than Koa Peat?
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I mean? So higher ranked recruit than Brayden Burries, Koa Peat, and, like, it's just some classes are harder to get up there than others. And if you are in a weaker class and you do go to a certain school, that boosts their recruiting up by that much more. So just something I thought about when you were explaining that is pretty interesting in terms when we're doing these comparison ratings. It's just all so, like, unique to that year.
It's very relative. Yeah, I think that's a good point. And like, that's where that fourth spot is where the 2025 class comes in, and it's the first class of the Tommy Lloyd era that makes the list here. Tommy's classes, while I think he's done a really good job of finding some gems, really, like, you think of Tommy's first class in particular, and we were talking about that one, Kevin, before the show, like, really horrific ranking when you truly look at it. But he brings in Umar Ballo and Pelle Larsson from a transfer standpoint, and those guys become staples of the starting lineup of this program. And Pelle Larsson starts for 3 years and Umar Ballo starts for 2. Like, those were huge hits that were not considered super high level, players to bring in at the time. And so I think Tommy Lloyd has done better than maybe what, like, the class rankings would suggest so far. But I also think, and I think a lot of Arizona fans would agree with this, that's a factor of Tommy Lloyd being such an elite coach in a way where maybe he hasn't had the elite level talent yet at Arizona to an extent, but he's been able to rise all tides when it comes to the players on his roster because he truly is that great of a coach. Now give him those elite players and see what he can do, molding elite players into, potential champions. And I think that that's where the 2025 class is just so much different than anything that we've experienced so far with Tommy Lloyd. We're going to talk more about the details of this class and go into it, but you bring in two 5-stars, 2 clear-cut 5-stars, one guy in Dwayne Aristote who in a different class could potentially be a 5-star, is, right there on the cusp of being a 5-star versus a 4-star. And then, as we talked about, the Karchenkovs, the CD Gays, the Mobile Mawats, like, you're bringing in players that, what could they be? it's a mystery box, but if any of them are contributors, that just changes the scope of what this team can do next year. So,
Yeah.
The 2025 class is absolutely special, and I think it, at least figures to be better than 2017 and better than 20. What was the last one? 2015.
Yeah.
That 2012 class, tough to beat, honestly. But I think that 2025 matches up with those other two and should be considerably better.
And also, like, you brought up the idea of Tommy Lloyd getting the most out of his players. Lion X in the chat says, and to think that people question Tommy Lloyd's recruiting ability, and then you have him putting together this kind of recruiting class, which really kind of gets Arizona hopefully back into the swing of what has been a tradition for them in terms of being in that top 5, top 10 recruiting classes in the country. Because
Sean Miller, I mean, Lute established that, but
Yes.
Sean Miller really took that to another level where
Yes.
he just was consistently every year, just Arizona at the forefront of recruiting. And I think if Tommy Lloyd can do that in a way that's slightly different than Sean Miller, like just tweak it from a personality standpoint, because I think Tommy can weed out the right personalities a little bit better than Sean Miller. Sean Miller was a little bit more like, we're going to go after this guy because he's the most talented player we can get. And Tommy's a little bit more of like, well, this guy's incredibly talented, but he also fits what we're trying to build here culture-wise.
Yeah.
Because Sean Miller had a lot of misses from high-level recruiting standpoint. And I just don't see that really happening with Tommy Lloyd as much.
And also, like, I think an important part to note about this is when you are Tommy Lloyd and you're trying to build a culture, like a unique kind of culture at Arizona, you're using bits from Lute Olson, you're using bits from Sean Miller, but it's your own thing that you're trying to build here. You weren't like a successor that was picked by the guy like you would have been if you stayed at Gonzaga potentially, right? So it does take time for that to come into fruition and for recruits to even know, like, do I trust this guy? Like, what's his track record? Is he good as a head coach? Like, but he's starting to put together now good results. I know that some Arizona fans, mileage may vary on how you feel about the results that Tommy Lloyd gets, but objectively, they're good results. He's one of the winningest coaches for the amount of time that he's been coaching in history, right? And so I think, like, recruits are starting to notice that. They're starting to take him more serious. And I think, when I was going through it, I think from 2001 to 2020, I believe Arizona only did not have a top 10 class, I believe, 6 times, right? Now, from 2020 to this year, this is the first time they've gotten back into the top 10, period. Right now, they're all the way back into the top 3. But I think that hopefully this could start a trend of Tommy Lloyd getting Arizona recruiting back to where it once was. It was as a coveted location for basketball in the West. And it never lost that. But when you go through a new coaching change, you have to regain that trust and stability. And hopefully this 2025 class is a sign of more of these to come, right?
Absolutely. I'm just going to name a couple more of these classes that are, and I'll run through them pretty quickly here, that are in and around the 2025 class. Coming in at number 5, rounding out the top 5 classes, you have the 2019 class. The 2025 class just edged out the 2019 class, and that was the class that brought in Nico Mannion, Josh Green, Zeke Nagy, who, was supposed to be an insane class, man.
My freshman year of college.
Dude, and do you remember the buzz around that class? Because I certainly do. Like, when I was in school too, even though I'm UNC. And, obviously that was the year that they canceled the tournament. I think Arizona would have been an early out in that tournament, to be completely real with you, after watching that season. So we kind of might have lucked out on that one and saved ourselves some extra embarrassment. But Nico Mannion was supposed to be like the truth in terms of point guards. Josh Green was like the international prospect to get. Zeke Nagy ended up being the belle of the ball in that class and actually was the by far the highest level contributor you got there. And then you bring in Christian Koloko from a depth perspective. And that was really the crown jewel of that class when it's all said and done. Like, that guy was a very, very good college basketball player, and in large part probably because of what Tommy Lloyd did for his development. But you move on there, and you're talking about bringing in the 2014 class, which had Stanley Johnson, PJC, and Dusan Ristic, and Kadeem Allen. That's a really good class. That's one of the better classes, I think, on this list. That one's probably a little bit underrated, I'd argue. You have Stanley Johnson, who was 3rd overall recruit, but PJC was, probably underrated due to his size, but also due to the fact that he probably needed some development years in college basketball, just being like a 5'7", 5'8" point guard. Like, he needed a little bit of time to acclimate. Ended up being a very good player. Dusan Ristic the same way. And then Kadeem Allen, you bring him in from community college, and the guy was a multi-year starter, really good player. You bring in 4 good players in that class. I think that's up there with the best of them. 2007 class, people remember that one, I'm sure. Jared Bayless and Jamel Horn were both in that class, very high-level recruits. It ended up being like kind of a decent class, but not really a great one, I wouldn't say. 2011 brought in, I believe that was the Nick Johnson, Josiah Turner, Siddiqui Johnson, Angelo Chol class, which had a ton of hype as well. Josiah Turner didn't end up being what he should have been at Arizona, but Nick Johnson was definitely, better than his ranking indicated, even though he was ranked highly. Then you have the 2020 class, which was, that class is really good. And that was was the best work Sean Miller did towards the end of his tenure, bringing in Dalen Terry, Ben Matherin, Azuolas Tubelis, Kerr Kriisa, and some transfers and some more supplemental players as well. But you brought in 4 contributors there, including Ben Matherin, Dalen Terry, and Azuolas Tubelis, who were staples of that first Tommy Lloyd team, high-level contributors. I mean, Sean Miller cooked with that one, Kevin.
He did. I mean, you bring in, the Eddie Lampkin killer himself, Benedict Matherin, who would go on to be a very high-level, borderline all-star quality NBA player.
I wish that was my nickname.
The Eddie Lampkin killer?
I hate him so much.
I guess, I don't know. We can talk more about that after the show. But Benedict Matherin, he is a very incredibly high-level player, and a player that, in terms of the, little teaser for maybe a future episode, in terms of the all half decade or all quarter century team, certainly has a case to be a part of that, right? And I think that you're right. That is some of Sean Miller's best work, getting in the kitchen and when the rent is due, producing, so to speak. You know what I mean? They often say rappers, once the rent payments are all good, the raps start to become a little worse. Sean Miller, the FBI came through and he said, I got to make this work or else I'm going to be staying forever.
Let me bring in some guys, international prospects.
The rent was due and Sean Miller paid up in full. Unfortunately, he wasn't really around to reap the benefits of that and continue it. But yeah, definitely set a very strong foundation of which Tommy Lloyd has tried to follow suit.
That class was no doubt, like, from a Sean Miller perspective, the FBI stuff happened. He couldn't get the blue chippers anymore. So that class, given that how good it is, even more impressive, but also like him and Jack Murphy, because Jack Murphy was an assistant coach at that time. They brought in Azuolas Tubelis, which was, he obviously he had his flaws, but he was a really good college basketball player. You find Kerr Kriisa, you bring him in. Benedict Matherin was extremely underrated for the caliber of player that he was, and he was an international prospect. And then the one like big time American player you bring in is from the state of Arizona and grew up his whole life wanting to be an Arizona Wildcat. So it's not like it was like Dalen Terry gave you a little bit of a head start on that recruitment process. So it wasn't it seemed like definitely like there was a stain on Sean Miller at that time, and he found a way to work around that.
Got to get in your bag. When your back is up against the wall, you got to get in your bag, especially from a recruiting standpoint. If you can't go out and get those blue chippers, you had better do all the due diligence to make sure that the players you're bringing in, you're not wasting your time. And there were really only a couple players in that class, that 2020 class, that weren't real, productive players. But for the most part, even a Justin Kier, right, transfers in.
I think that's wrong. I think Justin Kier was in the next class.
Damn, 24/7.
Yeah, don't you? Right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Because that freshman year for Matherin wouldn't have been the year Kier was there. Justin Kier was on the sophomore year Matherin team, and then he left for the draft.
Oh, you're right.
So I think they screwed that up, or maybe Justin Kier committed before like a certain date, so it made it look weird on the website's end. But just kind of rounding out some of the best classes here. 2016, Larry Markkinen, Raleigh Alkins, Kobe Simmons. Kobe Simmons disappointing, Raleigh Alkins and Larry Markkinen, both really good players. 2009, this is one of the best classes ever in Arizona basketball history. This is this is Sean Miller's first year. Tim Floyd gets fired at USC. All of the USC recruits decommit. That means Derek Williams, Momo Jones, Solomon Hill.
Come on down.
They're all free. Sean Miller brings all of them in, and it changes Arizona basketball for the better. Also, Kevin Parham was in that class. Unreal class. Derek Williams, Solomon Hill, just like unbelievable class there. And then that 2013 class I mentioned already, like blue chippers in that class, Aaron Gordon, Rondé Ellis Jefferson, just didn't need to bring in that many players that year. And so I think it hurts the overall ranking, but definitely up there with the best in terms of contributions that you got. So those are kind of that's the 12 best classes in Arizona basketball history. Of course, that doesn't go back to the 80s, the 90s, because that data wasn't necessarily available. But we did put together what we think are the best classes in Arizona basketball history, and we'll hit that right after the break here on the AZ Wildcats podcast.
And I want to talk to people at home about our friends over at Chicken and Pickle.
Wow.
Everybody, Chicken and Pickle. We recently had our
Elite.
pickleball tournament there, and I hear it was a great time. I was wrapped up in my moving process, so I couldn't go out there. But because it was at Chicken and Pickle, I had the most FOMO because I knew that it looked like a good time. And I know that the food at Chicken and Pickle is incredible, as Damon gives the all good thumbs up. So make Chicken and Pickle in Glendale your go-to spot for good food, good friends, and great fun. And especially if you love pickleball, and not just pickleball, but yard games in general, Chicken and Pickle is your spot. So enjoy some friendly competition of your own or on the courts and in the game yard, where I know we had our tournament there. So that's another way to get in on the competition as well. Supporting your local, sports media company, PHNX. So serving up good times on the court and great food in the restaurant. Visit Chicken and Pickle at 9330 West Hannah Lane in Glendale. Just make sure, to have a good time, because pickleball is supposed to be fun. Family-friendly fun awaits. Visit chickenandpickle.com to plan your visit today.
We are blessed in this state and in the Valley in particular, but also in Tucson, to be surrounded by elite level sports, right? And whether it's the Super Bowl, waste management, you name it, man. Like there is sports here year round, and they are the absolute pinnacle of their respective sports, right? No, it's no different when it comes to NASCAR. Phoenix Raceway Championship Series over at Phoenix Raceway. It's going on again here in 2025. It's coming up on October 31st through November 2nd. And guys, it's time to get your tickets right now, because they sell out every year. And this is the last year that the championship series is going to be in Phoenix at Phoenix Raceway for quite a while, because they're going to start rotating it around to different cities. It's always been in Phoenix. Make sure you guys are out there for that final race weekend, where it is permanently in Phoenix, because they are going to make it worth your while. We were out there at Phoenix Raceway at the foothills of the Estrella Mountains not that long ago, filmed some content. It was a great time. It was such a vibe. And it's definitely a sports experience that you're going to have to experience in person. So don't miss your chance to witness the NASCAR Championship weekend in person, coming to Phoenix Raceway October 31st through November 2nd. Tickets for Sunday's Cup Series Championship race sell out every single year, as I said. So move fast. Get yours now before they're all gone. And here's the kicker. NASCAR's taking championship weekend on the road starting in 2026. So this is your last chance to catch it in Phoenix for quite a while. Tickets, hospitality, and upgrades are still available. Get yours now at the link in our show notes below. It's going to be electric. Head on out there.
It is. It is indeed. I gotta make it out there, because I've never been to like a live NASCAR event. I've been to like the Indy 500. Like that thing, I've taken the tour. Like they take you behind and do the thing. You can walk on the bricks and all that stuff. But I haven't like gone to like a live like event for NASCAR where the cars are zoom in and you got to wear the earplugs. I don't know, but it seems like a lot of fun. And I think it might have to be Phoenix Raceway. I might have to make it happen. But Damon,
I feel like being from Missouri, you should be like a gearhead, a NASCAR guy.
I think we've had this conversation before.
Probably.
I'm from St. Louis, not Missouri, so it's a little bit different, I feel like. Because, if you're driving through the state, once you've entered Missouri and once you've entered St. Louis. It's a very different vibe almost immediately. But hey, there are a ton of NASCAR fans in St. Louis. I never caught the bug specifically. I don't know a carburetor from a piston, you know what I mean? So, I don't know.
Yeah.
As Glenn encourages me in the chat to go to NASCAR, because you just never know what you're going to see. It could be the greatest thing you've ever seen in your life. But it does. I will say, the live action, like the speed of it. I think it's the reason I think hockey is the best live sport, because it's something always consistently going on, and it stops, but like only briefly. NASCAR, I'm sure that's like an adrenaline rush like no other, like for both the driver and for the fan, right?
I think can we divert on that for a second? Just
Sure.
because I think hockey is incredible live. So I agree with you, and I think that your reasoning is sound for why it's incredible live. But I also don't think that makes it that's a negative for other sports. Like baseball is incredible live.
It is.
And there's tons of stoppages. And
True.
I'd argue that's probably why it's so great live, because it's just a chill environment. You're there, you can kind of, talk to your friends for a second and then go back to the pitch. And so I don't know. I feel like different strokes for different folks, but in my opinion, those are the two sports I would most want to see live are baseball and hockey. And then on TV, like I think football is hard. You can't beat it.
I'll say this. I think baseball is the sport that your enjoyment improves the most when you take it from TV to live.
Gotcha. Yeah, I
think like football is the opposite. Like if you go watching on TV, you have a great time. Watching in person, for me personally, unless you're like an NFL guy, just sit me in front of the TV. I'd rather watch it there because
I think college football a little different for me.
Yes, because the atmosphere is a lot different.
Yeah, NFL football, I think most people would say in America they'd rather watch on their TV from their couch than go to the game.
Yeah,
which is especially when you factor in how much money you're paying and parking costs and all of that. Like, unless you're using Game Time, and then you can get the best last minute tickets for the lowest price guaranteed.
Guaranteed. Game time. Game time. I was gonna say though, Damon, that like we first of all, we're talking about live experiences. I can't imagine how insane that first game at McHale is gonna be this year. You know what I mean? What's the first home game this year on the schedule?
Let's check it out.
But I can't even imagine the environment in there this upcoming year. The Cactus coming back to the court, the incredibly loaded non-conference schedule, the even more loaded roster. I think it's Auburn.
Yeah.
You owe me a soda, Damon, dog. If I drank sodas. I mean, rum and Coke. Anyway, December 6th. Damn, that's so long away. But December 6th versus Auburn is going to be that first game in McHale. That's an unbelievable matchup for the opener of the home season. I can't wait for it. But yeah, we were talking about atmospheres, and I started thinking about like when the flames shoot up from the, when they're doing the intros and the, I don't know.
I miss
McHale, man. Yeah,
like this.
I miss McHale. I miss McHale a lot, man. That's a great place to watch a game. Even Pete Souza knows.
Very true. Kevin, we are going to discuss some of the other classes that you could consider like the best classes in Arizona basketball history in comparison to this one, and just kind of what themes that they have that maybe we could compare and contrast to. And do you want to do this kind of in like a starting from the old days to more modern history, or do you want to go back in time?
Let's go back in time and then get back to the present. So let's start at the old, end with the new.
Gotcha. So I think, just and I'm gonna throw a bone to some of our old heads out there that are watching that maybe are they're not happy with that last discussion in regards to the ratings. And like I said, like they just don't have the data from the rating standpoint from some of those older classes. But we do, however, know some of the players that played on these older classes. And so we can still kind of value them up and talk about, the greatest classes in Arizona history, starting with 1972, which was nicknamed the Kitty Corpse because of how, which is such a 1972 nickname, isn't it?
That's a strange one. That's a strange one.
Local media nicknamed the team that because they were such a young team and had a bunch of underclassmen contributing very, very early on.
It's not exactly like a Phi Slamma Jamma or a Fab Five now, is it?
Not exactly.
No, it doesn't really have the same ring to it.
That was when Fred Snowden came over, from being an assistant coach at Michigan, took over the Arizona basketball program, and brought in a bunch of Michigan kids with him. He had Eric Money, who was kind of the first star, I feel like, of Arizona basketball. Coneal Norman, Al Fleming, and Jim Rappis. All four were high-level contributors for the Wildcats, and Eric Money in particular was an absolute star player. So that was kind of like the first official, like, kind of star-studded class that got brought over here to the U of A. Moving on to 1983.
Real quick, if you and I were around in 1972 doing this here podcast via the, I don't know, fireside chat, whatever you wanted to call it back then, certainly Eric Money is a first ballot Hall of Famer, right? Eric Money? The man's money.
You're saying for the Hall of Fame?
Hall of Namer,
Hall of
sorry. Hall
Names?
of Namer. For
Yeah,
certain, right?
I don't know if you said that.
No, yeah, mentally I did.
Yeah.
Physically probably didn't. But Hall of Namer has to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're like a combo guard, like you're like the lead scorer on the team, pretty fire.
Unbelievable. But yeah, we can continue to 1983.
1983 kind of considered the turning point class for Lute Olson in his tenure. Of course, like that was like his first class he brought in, so not necessarily like, I guess turning point's the wrong word, but kind of just embarked on the elite program that Arizona was to become. You bring in Pete Williams and Eddie Smith, both very high level contributors for this program, and then the belle of the ball, Steve Kerr.
Yeah.
He kind of changes the outlook of Arizona basketball as a whole. And then in 1985, a couple years later, you bring in the greatest Tucson hooper of all time in Sean Elliott. You get him to stay home, partially probably because you see what's building at McHale Center. You see what's building, at the university. If you're Sean Elliott with Steve Kerr there and whatnot. And then you also have Anthony Cook in that 1985 class, who was a starter and a first-round draft pick. And you have Kenny Lofton, who is notoriously one of the greatest base stealers in MLB history, but played for Lute Olson, was a part of the 1985 class, and when he left Arizona was the all-time leader in steals in Arizona basketball history. Just kind of one of the all-time athletes, Kenny Lofton, but
Kleptomaniac, if you will.
Explain.
Steals, no matter what sport.
Yeah, sure. That's
Just
actually
a thief.
Yeah, he is a thief.
Yeah, I mean benevolently so, but he's a thief. I mean, I don't know how you want to define it, but if you lead the league or lead the program in steals at one place for one sport, change sports, go to the pros, steal in there too, that's a kleptomaniac to me.
Glenn, Caleb Tarczewski was not in the Aaron Gordon, Rondé Hollis Jefferson class. Yeah, Caleb Tarczewski was in a class with Brandon Ashley, Grant Jarrett, Gabe York. But two really good classes in their own rights. Moving on to the 1998 class. There's a lot of great classes in those 80s and 90s too that we're kind of skipping over, but it's almost somewhat because there's like Lute Olson was consistently bringing in like a star each class, it felt like. And then like more supplemental pieces, but it wasn't as as much as like it was in the Sean Miller, now current Tommy Lloyd era, where you could bring in multiple star freshmen at one time.
Different era.
It just, and there was less talent too.
Yeah. Like
basketball just wasn't as talented as a sport in the 80s than as it is now. That's like, that's obviously pretty
obvious. Year-round AAU, the $1,000 personal trainers, the whole thing. It's a year-round business now because you become a professional athlete once you get to college now, which is a wild thought.
Meisner said that Kenny Lofton went by Ken Lofton back when he played for the Arizona basketball team. A little fun fact for you.
But
1998, you bring in another class that was all-time. Richard Jefferson, Luke Walton, Michael Wright, and Rick Anderson, four people that started for the Arizona basketball team. And Michael Wright and Richard Jefferson were starters on that 01 team that made the national championship game. Luke Walton had a long NBA career, and Rick Anderson was a starter on a 2002 Elite Eight team as well. So four really good players in that class.
And that class, in terms of like alumni impact, is huge as well because of Luke. Almost called him Luke Walton, but because of Luke Walton and Richard Jefferson, like the legacy is true with that class. Like that's a class that if you're looking back on it as maybe not like you or I or the people in this chat, if you're like more of a casual Arizona fan or you're not an Arizona fan at all, if you're looking back at recruiting classes, you're like, damn, that 98 class must have been crazy. You know what I mean? Because it has some name value to it, as well as the 85 class. But I think RJ and Luke Walton, especially with the connection to Bill Walton there, it just has so much more cachet. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And then it's a bunch of classes that we talked about already. It's the 09 class with Derek Williams, Solomon Hill, Kevin Parham, and Momo Jones. It's the 2012 class with Tarczewski, Gabe York, Brandon Ashley, Grant Jarrett. 2014 with Stanley Johnson, Dusan Ristich, PJC, Kadeem Allen. 2020 with Ben Matherin, Julius Tabelis, Dalen Terry, Kirk Risa. And then one that I think kind of goes under the radar, Kevin, from a rating standpoint for sure, but this is the best class so far in the Tommy Lloyd era, and I think a great place to kind of wrap up this discussion, and we could talk a little bit comparing the 2023 class to the 2025 class after the break. But 2023, it's a little bit more transfer heavy, but Tommy Lloyd brings in Jaden Bradley, he brings in Kashad Johnson, brings in Caleb Love, brings in KJ Lewis, and Mo Krivas. That's a great class, man.
It is.
That's deep as hell.
I think when I was looking back at it, it's kind of, potentially recency bias there, but I feel like that's the most comparable class to what you have incoming. I know it's in like a bit of a different font, so you kind of have to, suspend a little bit of disbelief there. But if you just break it down to brass tacks, the 2025 class is 3 5-stars, a couple international players, and 1 veteran transfer. And if you, again, do the same thing for 2023, it's 2 high school 5-stars, 1 near 5-star in KJ Lewis. Mm-hmm. And then you also add Kashad Johnson, Pauliema, Mo Krivas. Like, that's an unbelievable class. And I feel like it's the most comparable to 2025. But like you mentioned, you and I are going to break all that down and more on the other side of this break, because I also want to talk to you about what all this even means for the 2025 team on the other side of this break on the AZ Wildcats podcast. And Damon, we got some more ads for you people here. And one of those great sponsors of this show is Monarch Money. And I use Monarch Money all the time. I used it this morning. I used it yesterday. Monarch Money is like my personal CFO. It helped me track my income, my expenses, my regular expenses, my recurring transactions, I guess is a better word for it. But it really helps me keep track of my finances, set goals, smash goals, and set new goals. I'm learning a lot about saving money with Monarch Money. And if you don't believe me, believe the Wall Street Journal, because it is the Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025. It's the financial tool that people actually love to use. It's the top recommended personal finance app by over 30,000 5-star reviews. So get control of your overall finances using Monarch Money. Use code PHNX for 50% off your first year of Monarch Money. A full year, 50% off using code PHNX at monarchmoney.com.
Such an insane offer that they got going on over there at Monarch Money. You guys know I had to show up with my branded bills on today on a fine Wednesday afternoon here, Kevin, as I was able to discover earlier on the show that it is indeed Wednesday. But
we got to get Steven a custom branded bills bucket hat is what we got to do.
We do absolutely have to do that, because whether it's a trucker, a snapback, a fitted, a beanie, even a bucket hat, Branded Bills has you covered, and we got a promo code for you. It is BBPHNX, and you will receive 15% off that first order. Arizona fans, there is no other headwear to get out there on the market, because Branded Bills makes the absolute best Arizona Wildcats gear you could find anywhere. I, of course, have our personalized Phoenix golf hat, PHNX Sports Branded Bills custom hats that you can find on our gophnx.com locker, which, of course, if you need anything customized, Branded Bills is the company to go to. But again, if you're an Arizona Wildcats fan and you're not repping Branded Bills apparel and gear, you are really missing out, guys. They're the most comfortable hats. They're the most stylish hats. And of course, they have, types of styles and fits that for every single person out there. So check out the campus collection now. Check out the campus collection they have specialized to the Arizona bookstore on campus there on University. And head to brandonbills.com, use promo code BBPHNX, and receive 15% off your first order.
And, we're finishing up breaking down the comparison of the 2023 class to the 2025 class. Glenn in the chat says he thinks that just from the outside looking in, the 2025 class is superior to the 2023 class. Where do you fall on it? I don't necessarily know if you can really give a good answer to this yet, because we do, even if you're trying to set aside hindsight bias, you have it in that you have the power of hindsight with the 2023 class, and you have no new information for the 2025 class. So it's really hard to say.
You don't have all the information on the 2023 class either, because Mo Krivas is in the 2023 class, and what he becomes, I think, is really impactful on this discussion. Jaden Bradley still has another year. Obviously, Kashad Johnson's been gone for a couple now. Caleb Love, he's up in the Ring of Honor, so that's a massive hit in terms of Caleb Love's contribution. KJ Lewis was a good player. Obviously, it didn't end the best, and he was looking for a bigger role probably elsewhere. That's probably the main factor as to why he left Arizona. and hopefully he finds that at Georgetown. But he still was a contributor on 2 separate Arizona teams. And then, as I said, Mo Krivas, like that one it's still up in the air what he could become and what his impact would be. If he's what Tommy Lloyd has kind of propped him up to be, I mean, that changes the outlook of that class completely almost. Like it goes from being like just a really, really good class and the best class of Tommy's tenure to an elite class. And I do think that, it is somewhat of an impossible discussion. And it's totally based off projection. But the 2025 class should be better.
Yes.
And I think they are better at basketball. If that makes
I know what you mean.
Like they are more talented.
Better prospects.
But is the impact going to be higher than the impact of that 2023 class? That remains to be seen, because I think that they almost have to have like an Elite 8 or better year to be considered that, because the 2023 class contributed to 2 Sweet 16 runs.
Yeah.
So you got to best that. And I don't think Koa Peat, Brayden Burries, maybe even Dwayne Arisote are going to be here after next year.
Oh.
So in my opinion, for them to be considered better, they have to best a Sweet 16 run. They have to go to an Elite 8, a Final Four, a national championship, or win it all, or else the 2023 class does still get considered to be better.
Can I muddy this argument even further?
Sure.
And by saying that maybe no matter what the 2025 class does, maybe it can't be better, because no matter what they do, Motiejus Krivas benefits, right? So if they go all the way,
that's a fair point.
Guess who else gets a national championship to their credit? That 2023 class.
Yeah.
Because Motiejus Krivas got it for him too.
It depends what that looks like.
You're right.
It depends the role he plays on that. Because
Yeah.
if he's like better than Awaka, and I think we all know exactly what we have in Tobe Awaka, and that's a very high level college basketball center that dominates rebounds. Like if he is forcing the issue and having, Tommy Lloyd have to put him out there late in games and tournament games and whatnot, and he's like one of the main catalysts of it, then maybe so. But if he's just playing, kind of splitting with Tobe Awaka, and they're both playing 20 minutes, but really it's Koa Peat and Brayden Burries that are leading the way, then I would still have to be like, 2025 for me above 2023.
No, yeah. And I mostly said that in jest, and it was more of a
changes the
vehicle.
math.
Yeah, and it's more of a vehicle just to say how, like you said, just how impossible this conversation can be. Because when you're breaking it down, you're like, well, does it matter that Motiejus Krivas, right, like really ultimately was from the 2023 class? Because, and this is kind of a good segue into what I was gonna end the show with today. Does it matter? Does any of what we just talked about ultimately matter? And what can we glean from it, right? One, I think, yes, it does matter. Like the history of the recruiting classes are important, because when you look back at what Arizona's been able to accomplish, right? You have one national championship, right, in 97, obviously. I'll remember it. Near miss a couple years after that as well. But I went back to 2009, and I tried to track how many national championship winners have had a top 10 recruiting class.
Yeah.
In hopes of being like, well, maybe if you're top 3, it's just a lock. I mean, hey, can we just write the post-game show now for Arizona cutting down the nets? And unfortunately, that was not the case. Going back to 2009, I believe if my math is correct, there's only been 6 occasions where a national champion has even been a top 10 class, right? The lowest being Villanova at number 9 back in 2018. The highest being 2012 with Kentucky having the number 1 ranked class going into that year. Other examples are Kansas in 2022. They had the 5th ranked class. 2015, Duke had the 2nd ranked class. 2013, Louisville with the asterisk had the 5th ranked class. And 2009, UNC had the 2nd ranked class. And what I was taken away from all this mostly was, right, you can combine the 2025 class incoming, which is one of the most elite classes that this year's cycle has to offer.
Yeah.
And it might be the best. Who knows, right? How Duke and Houston's classes play out. But does that tell us that they can win a national championship? No. But what does tell us that they could be in the running for a national championship is because what Arizona's done is they've combined one of the top 3 recruiting classes in the country with one of the best returning rosters in the country, right? And I think when you're looking back on these things and you're looking back on what can the recruiting classes tell you, I think almost what do the players that are from past classes that are still on the roster, what they tell you more than what the incoming freshmen will tell you, right? The Motiejus Krivas still being here, the Tobe Awakas being here, the Jaden Bradleys still being here, I think almost tells you more about what this team can do than what Koa Peat and Brayden Burries are going to be able to tell you preseason, right? And I think that when you combine elite freshmen with veteran returners that are already productive, you have a really dangerous team, and a team that could become the 7th team with a top 10 recruiting class to win a national championship. And that's why I think it's relevant, because Arizona's not just bringing in a bunch of blue chippers. They're bringing in blue chippers and then matching them with winners. And so I think they actually have quite the dangerous concoction there on their hands.
Yeah, we're going to take this discussion into overtime as we wrap it up real quick here on the AZ Wildcats pod. But Kevin, what you're saying there is entirely, I was going to say the exact same thing. It's like this class matches up with the best Arizona classes in terms of players that are getting brought in. But when you talk about some of these best classes, right? And, I brought up the 2023 class, which is a little different because it's very transfer heavy. So you're going to have a ton of experience on a transfer heavy class. These guys have all played college basketball before, especially Caleb Love, right? Like he played in the biggest moments already. But, the 2020 class needed a second to acclimate. They weren't ready in 2020. The 2014 class, Stanley Johnson was ready. The rest of the team kind of needed a little bit of time to get their feet wet. 2012, they were, the guys were good. They were good basketball players, contributors right away. But like Caleb Tarczewski was raw as hell. And, he went on to be a 4-year starter, but, they weren't ready to win the first year. 2009, same thing. They needed a year to get better. The sophomore year, Derek Williams was the best player in college basketball. Like you go down that list, 1998, another great class. Wasn't until 2001 that they made the national championship game. Like it's seemingly like those classes, it took a little bit of time, right? The 2013 class, like Aaron Gordon, Rondé Hollis Jefferson were contributors early. But the reason that team was so successful is because you had the blue chippers and those guys, and you supplemented it into teams that already had Caleb Tarczewski, TJ McConnell, Nick Johnson. You had established starters on those teams already, and that's Jaden Bradley. That's Tobe Awaka. That's Mo Krivas. That's even Anthony Dell'Orso and Evan Nelson to a lesser extent. Guys that know their role and know exactly what they're supposed to do and how they can help this team win. As seniors. So that's where, Kevin, I think, this class truly is special. Like, and I am in complete agreement with you. You have the blue chip prospects, but you're adding them already to teams that are built to win.
Yes.
Teams that have players at premier positions, point guard and center in particular, where you feel great about the players you have in those spots. You're writing in Sharpie Jaden Bradley's name down in the starting lineup already, or Tobe Awaka or Mo Krivas, one of the two. So I think that this team is, like, in terms of ceiling, like, is probably in the best place to win outside of maybe that 2013 class, which is funny because that was the lowest ranked of all the 12 classes that I brought to the table today. But I think that it almost is the most apt comparison. But to make 2025 even better, you had another top 10 guy in Brayden Burries versus Rondé Hollis Jefferson, who was kind of like 25th.
Yeah.
And then you have Dwayne Aristote, who is somewhat of that Rondé caliber player. And then you have all the mysteries of the European guys, the international prospects that you bring in. I say European guys because, like, CD Gay played for Real Madrid, but he's African. So the international prospects, like, that's where I think that those guys could be separators for this class as well. So it'll be interesting. I know we had a couple of people, by the way, Kevin, ask us about CD Gay's situation.
Yes.
I to my understanding, the athletic department and the basketball program is very much in the dark as to what's going on with CD Gay right now. And there's not really a timetable being put in place in terms of when CD Gay could potentially come to the United States. So we'll try to keep you updated on that, hopefully soon. And it's an immigration issue with since the change in president here, that there's a CD Gay. I believe South Sudanese. There's somewhat of a problem for South Sudanese people and immigration status coming over. So hopefully he can get that situated and figured out semi soon here. But Just in terms of the class, Kevin, I really do feel like that this class is truly built to win. This team is truly built to win, and we could be looking back on this and saying like 2025, like yeah, that's the best class in Arizona basketball history.
We really could. And also, like, people in the chat talking
18.
about how difficult the Big 12 is going to be this year and how difficult it can be to win the Big 12. And I think that this team, not only is it built to win at the broader college level, it's built to win in the Big 12 specifically. It's big, it's rough, it's tough, it's physical, and it's talented, and it's skilled. That is this upcoming 2025 roster. And I think as difficult as the Big 12 is going to be, I'm not, and again, I might live to regret this statement, but I'm not at all worried about like Arizona being, one of the best teams in the Big 12 because they've built their roster in a way that tells me that they're ready to do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm extremely confident in this 2025 class. And like Damon said, we could very well be looking back on it saying, wow, remember that 2025 class? Greatest class we've ever seen.
Glenn, I think it goes back to my point earlier about the like finding freshmen with maturity. I don't think Sean Miller did the best job of that. I think Sean Miller looked a lot to just find the most talented players and see if he can kind of collect the Infinity Stones, if you will. But Tommy Lloyd actually truly vets them, I believe, from a more of a personality standpoint. I think that that's more important to his staff. And that's why guys like Koa Peat are wired the way that they are, despite being kind of that blue chip elite prospect. Like he definitely has like, it's almost like when you hear him talk, it sounds like he's just like the coach's son.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I do think that the current culture of the program just kind of finds players in and of itself that want to be a part of what Arizona basketball is building. And so the personality standpoint there is just kind of, you're finding the right fits.
And it goes back to the comment I just threw up on the screen from W earlier saying that like, while Sean could, go out and cast a wide net, it feels like Tommy Lloyd is a lot more calculated, a lot more precise about which recruits he's bringing in. And it's for that exact reason you just alluded to.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Kevin, I'll put you on the spot. You think that this is where do you think that it stacks? I named a lot of classes, threw a lot of players at you. Where would you stack this one up going into the season? And do you think that they could find their way to the number one spot after the season?
I think it's a layup that for the answer to be yes, that they could find their way into the number one spot by the end of the season. It's too high of a caliber for me to put their ceiling any lower than that. And I think where I have them right now, I believe, this class is just so deep with hoopers that I think are just that. They're hoopers. Like I think of Ivan Karchenkov as being like the main guy that I'm like,
he could change things completely. Yeah.
He could totally change everything. I mean, yeah, I think this is coming in. I think you have to say this is the best class. And I'm not saying it's like by far and away, but no. I do think just like the caliber of having 3 top 20 recruits of all time, a top 5, a top 10, and a top 20 on your team at the same time, combining it with the ready to win roster that they're about to walk into, I think I'm there. I think I'm willing to say it's the greatest of all time, but it's so close because there are so many great recruiting classes in the school's history when we haven't even, like I haven't even brought up the idea that it's not even a number one class and you have multiple number one classes in the history of the program. And I know that that's not really the matrix that you and I are using to evaluate the best, but I know that other people might, maybe people who love the rings conversation might have the same attitude about rankings, right? If you're not the number one, then how good were you? You know what I'm saying? I think
first or last.
There's a million ways to eat this Reese's. And I think that the way that I'm choosing to snack on my Reese's cup is to say that I think it's the best that I've seen so far.
I'm with it, man. I'm with it. I won't necessarily go as far. I think that, there's a couple classes I might put above it. 1985 in particular, you get the greatest player in program history in Sean Elliott and another first-round pick in Anthony Cook, plus a high-level contributor in Ken Lofton. But also I might put that 09 class ahead of it too, just because Derek Williams is the best player I've ever seen at Arizona. And I hope Koa Peat can kind of match that. It might be tough given the fact Derek Williams played multiple seasons and was elite in that second season. And Koa Peat, like, who knows what sophomore Koa Peat would look like. But I just think, you also have Solomon Hill, who was a 4-year starter. Guy was unbelievable here. Momo Jones was great. Kevin Parham was great. Like those two classes I'm going to put ahead. But I do think that this class has every opportunity to kind of eclipse that. And as we talked about, like the mysteries and the unknowns of CD Game, Mobile Mawat, Ivan Karchenkov, even Bryce James.
You read my mind. I was going to say, we haven't even, this class is so loaded to my argument, right? That this class is so unbelievably loaded coming in that you have the son of potentially, however you feel about the debate, is potentially the greatest player of all time. And we barely have mentioned his name on an hour and 10-minute podcast so far. And I know that like he's not exactly like an elite level recruit, but you get my point here.
I think we almost factor him in with the international guys. Just given that it's like he's a little bit of a mystery, he probably needs a little bit more time to slow cook his development, and that's where I think that me and you kind of group him in with that, despite him not being a international prospect.
But yeah, no, you get my point though, right? Like the class is so loaded with true talent that you're not even getting infatuated with like the publicity of a Bryce James being on your team, because you're like, nah, we have real hoopers that we're worried about developing right now. I'm not saying Bryce James is not a real hooper, but from a fan's perspective, you're like, I think you're more enamored with what Ivan Karchenkov could be than what Bryce James can be, because I think you've seen Bryce James and you think, okay, there's a ceiling here and there's a floor here. But I think with Ivan Karchenkov, you're just like, is this guy like going to be incredible in his freshman year? Is he going to look like a project? Is he going to be, 2 years, 3 years player? Like, there's so many different options with this class. And that's kind of more so why I had it at 1. Now, also, by the same token, I could see this class like completely dropping if they now not completely dropping out of like too far. No, that's what I'm saying. Not completely dropping too far, but like I'm saying by the other end of the same coin I said earlier, where I can't put them any lower than 1, in terms of where their ceiling could be. I could see them dropping to like 3rd or 4th, kind of like where they're ranked by 24/7, the ratings you did earlier. I could see them dropping that low if the team doesn't produce as much as maybe we think that they could. But I lean more towards the top end of things.
I guess that's a little bit more of a different discussion because I have them 3rd. So
okay, yeah.
I don't necessarily think that that's like dropping, I guess.
Yeah.
But, I think that they're going to be, the floor on this class is incredibly high. The ceiling, I would say, is even higher. And the ceiling is to be the best class in the program's history, the best class in the country, and that's all going to be decided on the court. I do think that barometer of like having to make an Elite 8 run or better does kind of make or break that for me. And so I'm gonna go ahead and stick by that throughout the season. Like this class is deemed a success in my opinion if you make that Elite 8 run or better. But that remains to be seen. Big year for Tommy Lloyd in I believe year 5. I
believe 5, yeah.
of Tommy Lloyd at Arizona. And yeah, it's time to make a deep postseason run. I'd say, just given the teams, given the talent, given all the wins. Now it's time to put it on the table. But Kevin, that's going to do it for us today on the AZ Wildcats pod. Fun discussion, breaking down the greatest recruiting classes in Arizona basketball history, and where the 2025 class with Koa Peat and Brayden Burries stacks up. We're going to talk more about what Koa Peat and Brayden Burries had to say earlier today and their availability with local media. We'll do that tomorrow on Thursday at 2 p.m. on the AZ Wildcats pod. Make sure you guys are there for that. We'll also be breaking down any sort of news and notes within the athletic department that happened in the meantime. And talking football in the process. So excited for football season to be gearing up, and excited for all Arizona athletics in general. But you can follow my guy Kevin at Kevo Post. That's KEVOPOSTS. You can follow me at Damon Dog. That's DAWG on the end of that guy. And you can follow us at PHNX_Wildcats on all socials, including Instagram. So make sure you guys follow our Instagram account. Great content going out there daily. So it's going to do it for us. We appreciate everybody for being here. Like this video if you haven't done so already, and subscribe to the channel. We'll catch you later on the next AZ Wildcats pod. But until then, peace out. Bear down.
And go Cats.
We all silly like the mayor.